All right. Hello and welcome to the July edition of Tribal Cafe. We got Tribal Prof Jordan Goldstein on the line here. We got Spina and Trevor listening in, and we're doing a little bit of a different style episode this month. Um, we don't have like a specific theme. Maybe we do have a specific, maybe we do have a theme. Maybe we do. Maybe we do, but we don't have a specific topic, I'd say. The last one-off pod that you and I did, Goldstein, was on recalibrating the objective and subjective. We've had the legend of the team was the previous one, I think. Building your legend within tribal. And for this one, Goldstein and I little selfishly, maybe not though. We don't really know. This is really just going to be us workshopping our athletic / endurance philosophies. And Goldstein and I, we are both in the process of writing books. And with all of the experience and the lessons that we have been extracting and clarifying and providing to the team, I think that our understanding of kind of how we view sport, how we view personal development through sport, and the place that sport has in our lives, I think that it's evolved. And what I am most excited about this is that Goldstein and I first got connected. It was back in the fall of 2022. Is that right, Goldstein?
20, I believe, yeah, fall 2022.
Yeah, like September, October, November of fall 2022.
Right
And
before the first Ironman
right
Florida.
before the first Ironman Florida. And the whole thing that I wanted was like, I want help building out my endurance philosophy. And I have been using the terminology endurance philosophy. Goldstein Substack is the athletic philosopher. And as he and I have just been kind of hitting each other back and forth with ideas in our book writing processes, it hit me last week, like the athletic philosophy of endurance training. Like that tagline to me is just so pure. And so I'm excited to just lean into that a little bit. And I really want to use this time to revisit the 4 values that Goldstein and I built together as the foundation of my endurance philosophy. And we will see what revisions need to be made, and we'll just let it run from there. So that's what I got as our launching pad here, Goldstein. Please say what's up and add anything you'd like.
Going on teams, going on tribes, going on beautiful people on the outside listening in. I think it's always a good idea, no matter what process we're involved in, whether that's a training process, whether that's a business process, whether that's a creative process, to always be reflecting, always to have these sort of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months where we pause, we stop, we look back, we see what's been working, we see what's maybe fallen by the wayside, we'll see what's emerged, and that just allows us to recalibrate moving forward. When we talk about a philosophy, one of the things I want everyone to really appreciate is that the philosophy that we are talking about is not some static, rigid list of tenets or principles or concepts that are in a book or that are on the wall somewhere and that, stand like that. This is a living philosophy. This is a dynamic philosophy. It's a lived philosophy, right? It's an experiential philosophy. And just as our lives move and change, so too should the philosophy as we continue to move inside of it. And I guess on the outside too, when it comes to creating from ideas, but also using the truth of what we do with our bodies and training and competition to sort of blend together and create what Ryan has tagged the athletic philosophy of endurance training.
And this to me, like I see this as our lane over the next decade. Like nobody else is speaking like this and digging into endurance training specifically like this. And I think about like the most interesting parts of different like sports teams I've learned of. I'm thinking specifically of like the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan and the Bulls, right? And like one of the coolest things to me was like Phil Jackson is like this Zen master, right? And they bring him in and he's having them do, these like Eastern practices before training that are just super different to the standard American show up, warm up, train, leave kind of a thing, right? And we even just saw there was something online that I saw last month. I think I either saw it from you or shared it with you that the Edmonton Oilers brought in some kind of like sport philosopher historian Goldstein version of a person. And all of a sudden, the Oilers make it all the way to the cup, right? So, as the team continues to grow through this, and as we continue to have these team experiences like Zion, Chattanooga, different training experiences from folks, different athlete individual race experiences, right? Like Happy Valley this weekend, right? Like this is all adding fuel to this fire that is alive and growing. Like you said, it's not some static thing. And I think that if I'm being honest, when I started this process with you back in 2022, I think I was looking for something that would be like basically my version of like a set it and leave it and it's done and it's good forever. And a continued theme that I learn and observe through you, Goldstein, is the idea of emergence and allowing things to grow and allowing things to bloom and flower. And so that's part of what we have going on here. I have two ways that I want to take it from right here. One is going through the four values that we had worked on together, but the other, is that what you have up? Okay, then let's just start with that. But I do want to circle back to what you're working on with your book too.
Yeah, let's save that part for the end because
Okay.
my work is a slow burn.
Okay.
So let's go to the four values, which I've got pulled up right here if you want me to list them off.
Yeah, I've got the Substack post. These are also, if you guys want to read what basically like kind of the cumulative post of this became, this is the pinned post on my Substack. And is titled what? An Introduction to My Endurance Philosophy. And it's got these four values with a little bit of story, a little bit of color added in. But the four values here, I'll just read them off. Number one is competition. Number two is potential. Number three is responsibility. And number four is loyalty. And one of my favorite parts of this whole process is that we basically turned each of these values into a little formula. So competition equals public risk plus personal action. Potential equals interest plus environment. Responsibility equals freedom plus leadership. And loyalty equals discipline plus desire. What do you got on that as immediate feedback, Goldstein?
I love at the very end of that article how it's all summarized. So that's kind of like how I'm looking at this. So
that was what I just read through the summary at the end.
Yeah. But then you have 2 bullet points for each. So competition, we must step into the arena and test ourselves in public. Once our true character is revealed, we have the chance to strengthen it. Love that. The first thing that's like just popping out to me out of all of these things is how organically these seem to emerge in the 70.3 that just occurred over the weekend with Charlie.
Tell me more about that. What are you specifically seeing?
And with Matt and with Trevor. Competition, that's the honesty, right? That's the public risk part of this where, for Matt, it's a bit of a redemption. His 70.3 last year didn't go quite as well, which is one of the reasons why he joined up. And Charlie, we're going to make it or are we not going to make it, right? So there's this it's this testing round, right? Like, so the public part of that where everybody's got to watch, or everyone gets to watch and we don't get to run away from whatever those results are, I think just builds really nicely off of the objective stuff we talked about last week. And then it's like, test ourselves in public and have our true character revealed. Like, we saw the best of both of those guys through the race. And right. It's not necessarily, you don't even necessarily even have to be in the race. Like Trevor showed us the best of who he is, right? Like right. showing up for teammates, being there in service. Potential, interest plus environment. we all have excellence within us, but it will stay dormant without the right conditions. Come on.
Boom.
Like
Let me
that's
actually add
that,
something to the competition piece,
please,
because this is a
please.
huge part of like the endurance mindset and competing in endurance sports, right? So um Charlie had many opportunities to quit on that bike ride specifically, right? And you think about, there's probably a version of Charlie that isn't training for a 70.3, isn't competing in this thing, and he's just taking on some kind of gym goals where he's really setting his own metrics. There's really nobody's eyes on him, right? So it's very low stakes, very low pressure. And as a result of that, all those opportunities to quit in just sort of a general gym goal setting, the mind accepts those, right? And the lower self has more power almost. But because there was such public risk, like, we saw the truth of who Charlie is, right? Because Charlie quitting, that's not who Charlie is. That is not who Charlie is. There's a part of Charlie, just like there's a part of me and a part of you and a part of everybody that wants to quit, right? And that wants to stay safe and secure and protect us from potential failure. But that's not the truth of who we are, right? And it's through this public risk and the constraints of the competition, the rules of the competition that we have to subject ourselves to. That is where the true character is revealed. And then it says, right, once our true character is revealed, we have the chance to strengthen it. So in that race, I mean, we saw the best parts of Charlie, and Charlie also got to strengthen those parts. All these things that are parts of us, they're like muscles, right? And if you never flex that muscle of resilience and endurance and staying in the fight when you've got every reason to quit, that muscle is going to atrophy. But I'll tell you what, Charlie's race was 8 hours and 28 minutes. And that whole damn time he's flexing that muscle of showing his true character and his higher self. And that is the transformation, right? That's the transcendence. That's the opportunity of competition.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. It is this idea of opportunity. And we talk a lot about like that balance between the subjective and the objective, because hey, when we put ourselves out there, like there's a good chance we're not going to succeed. Like we're not going to hit the mark. We're going to come up short. Um, and that's why we talk about the subjective a lot, because if we do miss that objective mark, we want to be able to gain something in terms of like a lesson, some type of a growth characteristic inside of us, and a path forward, right? So that we can grow from the experience. But without the win or loss, like we don't have that capability within ourselves, right? So the competition is crucial. And then the next part of this potential, which is interest plus environment. When we follow our interests and surround ourselves with people, habits that encourage progress, our personal greatness begins to shine. Like that video that Matt shared where Charlie is kind of, he's coming up to the entrance of the stadium, and he's he's dragging a bit. And that's not a comment on you at all, Charlie. That's a big day, man. So he's dragging, and all of a sudden, like Matt's like, "Come on, Charlie, like pick it up, like let's get a run." And before Matt has even finished talking, you see Charlie he doesn't even look back, but boom, he starts to get into that nice little groove of a nice jog. And I spoke with Matt earlier today, and it was very similar in terms of like the team showing up for other people in terms of like having a standard and wanting to make those people proud, right? Who you're associating yourself with. So it's like the competition plus our interest plus the people who we surround ourselves with, right? We're now starting to see that it's not just, oh, I got to sign up for a competition and all of a sudden the best parts of me are going to emerge. It's the competition is the arena, and we have to create the correct conditions to allow those best parts of you to emerge. And that's just like one of the beauties of being on the team, right? That's one of the big pulls that we had out of Zion and Chattanooga, right? The team creates space for deeper meaning to emerge beyond the race. And I think, and Trevor's on here, and Trevor just showed everybody on the team like what that looks like, where he's there supporting. Nobody told him to go. It wasn't like you or I were like, "Hey, Trevor, we need somebody on the ground at Happy Valley. Can you go be our eyes?" And this is his own initiative, right? Because he's felt that push and that support from other people on the team when he's needed it, and he knows how powerful that can be, not just in terms of like finishing the race, but in that transcendence that we're all kind of after. And so he eagerly gives up his weekend to go and support these guys, right? And it made a huge difference. I know that Trevor played a huge role in helping Charlie on those bike moments where he was struggling, right? So it's not even necessarily within the competition itself that we can discover these big moments. It's just that the competition gives us the ability to, and I think we talked about this in Zion, it's like to serve different roles, while also getting this incredible meaning. And then that leads to the next one, which is responsibility.
So let me cut in there on potential, the
leadership.
interest and environment.
Please.
So to me, like,
Please.
I almost am looking at this from like, how could somebody go about endurance and just not do it right or not make progress? I'm not sure that I'm really framing this the right way, but I'm really thinking about somebody who has interest but not environment. So I talked to a lot of guys. Oh, I'm thinking about doing a 70.3, thinking about getting into endurance, thinking about getting a bike, thinking about doing an ultra, right? But they don't have the environment of the team that orients them towards merging those together and creating an opportunity for their potential to shine bright, right? And so it's like, when we think about really just like plugging people in here, it's like having the interest to do the thing, right? Like you have to have some kind of interest to get more out of yourself, to challenge yourself more, to get into triathlon, to get into ultra marathon, right? To get into this in some sense, to improve some part of yourself, right? That's the interest. The interest is I want to get more out of life. I want to get more out of myself. Well, we need the right environment, right? And environment is it certainly can be like in the arena on the day, but the environment also, as everybody on the team can feel, right? Like the environment can just be surrounding yourself, flooding your mind with little pings and messages from the team chat, seeing the other guys on the squad on Twitter, seeing guys on team calls, listening to podcasts. It doesn't even have to be like a direct line of communication. It can just be like, what is the environment that you are curating for yourself, right? Is your environment, is your feed filled with all the nonsense that's pulling you back to the life that you're trying to escape from, right? Or are you flooding yourself with this continued repetition of things that support the interest, right? That's the whole pairing towards potential. And yeah, I think the examples from the race weekend are just fabulous. All right, you can go on, lead the way here with responsibility next, and we'll just keep rolling like this.
Yeah. So we got responsibility, which is freedom plus leadership. And your note here is personal leadership comes from realizing the responsibilities attached to your freedoms and goals. And now, if we think about how this maybe blends
this
a
is
little
good.
bit.
These are better than I actually kind of was expecting when we got into this. These are really good. And I'm thinking about a couple examples that I'm excited to share on here.
They're great. It's just, and to take it back to this idea of environment, one of the beautiful parts about the team is and we have an entire podcast on this. It's on boundaries and how boundaries create the proper conditions for freedom, right? A lot of what happens, I think, in the adult world to sort of move us out of this play area that we find ourselves in terms of training and competing and sort of focusing on these more subjective elements. It's really like, man, it's so crucial that we place the right boundaries and the right rules on ourselves. And the team gives us, I think, the right frame where clearly we're responsible for the training. Clearly we're responsible for showing up on race day and like giving our physical effort and giving what we have, but we also don't have this very limited little box. And this is what we talked about last week. You see these guys all the time, like the higher end triathletes who only have their eyes fixated on the results, right? They're totally closed off from these other elements of the race. And when we talk so much in the group, in the tribe, about what the training and competing is doing for us outside, right? What are we doing for the people inside of the team? We're opening up their eyes to the things they should be paying attention to on race day and in the training, right? So there's this openness that comes with the play, and that leads us right into, how am I showing up as the leader of my home? How am I showing up in business? How am I showing up as a responsible athlete when I'm on a call with the coach, right? So we are always, I think, within the team and the tribe, creating these really nice boundaries for people to have this freedom plus responsibility on the inside. And that, more times than not, and there's just so many stories of this, means people taking those steps outside of the training context and incorporating those lessons directly into their lives, which would be, I think, one of the biggest hallmarks of this athletic philosophy of endurance training. Is how do we, in a non-superficial way, extract out deep lessons from what we do with our bodies and then translate them into other parts of our lives? This is something that, when you mentioned this is our lane, there's a lot of people who can touch the very surface of this, right? Oh, I'm determined in my training, therefore I can be determined at work. Okay, but why? How? That's where we're at here. Is we're really given the legs, and we're really providing the depth, as to not just like that it works, but why it works. Because we have the evidence. We've definitely got the evidence in here. So I'm sure those are some of the stories that are popping off in your mind there.
Yeah, well, I mean, my favorite part of this, so responsibility equals freedom plus leadership, but then the bullet starts with personal leadership. And so often we think about leadership as, how can I organize my 3 kids to get out the door? Or how can I run my team at work? Or how can I set an example for my family? But that all starts with leading yourself. And I think that way too many people overlook that. And then let me just read right through this here. So personal leadership comes from realizing the responsibilities attached to your freedoms and goals. So attached to your freedoms. So, I mean, a lot of us are living, generally cushy lives, right? We could sit around all day, outside of the work hours, right? And we can kind of fuck off on our responsibilities if we want to. We can sit and we can doom scroll in the evening. We could hit snooze and wake up. But part of leading yourself is realizing that you have these windows of time. And one of the huge, like, Robert Greene and Ryan Holiday lessons that I've taken over the years is alive time versus dead time. We can't have these little 30-minute windows, hour windows throughout the day where we're just dicking around doing nothing. Like, if we've got goals, if we want to fulfill our responsibility to ourselves and to our families and to all these other areas of life, like, we need to step up and deliver on those opportunities where we have the chance not to, right? Like, that's the whole idea of freedom, is that we could step forward and we could step into that higher version of ourselves, but we also have the opportunity to not do that. And that's the choice, right? And then I really like how it finishes with, responsibility attached to your freedoms and goals. So listen, you've set these goals, dog. Let's go. You've set these goals to do an Ironman. You signed up for an Ironman, right? You signed up for a 100-miler. You signed up for an ultra. You signed up for your first half marathon. It doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter what the goal is. But pairing this all together and realizing that, we have, responsibility. Another word that's sticking out to me is like obligation. We have an obligation to ourselves, right? A big thing that I lean on is like, listen, not everybody is blessed with the drive to do things like this. Not everybody's blessed with the thought that, could I do an Ironman? could I do a 70.3? Like, not everybody has those thoughts. And so if you're somebody who is blessed to have that kind of a perspective, even if it's just a 1% fraction of a chance that you think you might one day be able to do it, like, that's enough. We have a responsibility to fulfill that. So, that's really what I think about. I mean, the couple of kind of athlete examples that I was thinking about, they touch on some of those themes that I sprinkled in there, right? It's like you got, an hour between work calls midday, and you could get on the bike and bang out your workout, or you could just let that time drift away into the abyss of nothing, where not only does nothing get done, but now all of a sudden you're reinforcing this identity of just lethargy and laziness, right? And then all of a sudden that bleeds into, oh, well, now the kids are down and now I'm kind of worn down from the day, so I'm just gonna dick around on the phone, and now all of a sudden that bleeds into the next day. So there's not so much like a specific example or a specific story that I want to share, but those were just like themes that stuck out to me. Um, Especially because everybody that's in here, right, has big goals, and they have a responsibility to themselves to fulfill the obligations and the responsibilities that come with those goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just flows beautifully into the final one, which is loyalty, right? Discipline plus desire. Personal loyalty is forged by exercising the discipline your desires require, right? Like, we don't get to have it all, right? If we desire a big goal, if we desire personal growth, then we've got to trade something away. And that's generally what we've talked about on some of the other pods, like the low hanging fruit, but then getting into that trading off something that's difficult and that's positive for us. And it just brings back this idea that ultimately, in order to get the most out of this experience, we have to demand the most out of ourselves in body and mind and in spirit. Like, that's what this is all saying to me, right? And this is sort of why endurance as a training mechanism, I think more so than the other sports that we could choose to participate in, allows us to, say, transfer those life skills from one arena to the next, because I think endurance most accurately reflects our lives. And that's why it works so well. I made this argument on that Staying Free podcast that I dropped in the team chat, where we just talked about my base philosophy on all this stuff. And I'm not here to throw shade on other types of exercise, but if we are aiming our exercise towards transcendence or self-actualization, the top of the pyramid, these sort of spiritual needs, are we going to find those in activities that don't necessarily reflect my life experiences? What is life other than one giant endurance event? What is your day if not an endurance event? For me as a busy dad with 2 kids, running my own business, keeping up the house, like all these different things, each day is its own little endurance event. And it's like, okay, transition 1, like, kids are up. Now what do we do? Like, T2, kids are out of the house, right? And so when we map what we're doing in sort of the play zone with the real world, it becomes really obvious how the lessons transfer. And I don't think you're going to get that from powerlifting, from other kinds of sports that adults can compete in and can grow in, just like they can in endurance. Which is why I think we're able to maybe get more out of this experience than what other people can get out of other sports. And then in terms of loyalty, man, endurance just really brings it out of you. Think about what you said about Charlie. How many times did Charlie want to quit? Right. But his desire, right? His desire for his own goals, the correct environment, the interest, like all those other elements, the freedom, the responsibility, right? That's what determines his ability to say, no, I'm not quitting. I'm not quitting. Right. And ultimately, that's what we need in life, is however many times you get thrown up against it, the adverse situations, you think you're not going to be able to overcome it. Nah, quitting's not the option. Quitting's never the option. And that's what we learn the most in endurance.
Yeah, I love it. So I got a couple ideas that really stuck out to me there that I'd like to take this in the direction of digging into why endurance translates so much to everyday life, right? Or why it seems to just get so close to the truth of character development the way that other forms of exercise really can't. But we'll wrap up here. So, loyalty, discipline plus desire. I mean, again, I really just like how this says personal loyalty. Like, so much of this stuff is like how we are showing up for ourselves, right? And one key theme that's sticking out to me in my own life as of late is like just not throwing up zeros. Better than a zero, right? I had a couple sessions last week over the last 10 days that were like dog shit, but I got my touch in, get it done, move on, learn the lesson. And not only does, throwing up the better than a zero run make the next run better, but it also makes the next swim better. It makes the next bike better because you don't have these gaps in your process. So that's just like a day-to-day thing that I'm thinking about. Personal loyalty is forged by exercising the discipline your desires require. I like how it says forged because discipline is something that we kind of have to fucking forge, right? Like it's not an easy thing to just pick up out of nowhere. Like in some sense, like consistency and momentum, like those things, maybe I feel like they compound a little bit more easily.
Mhm.
Discipline, I feel like you got to grind through that shit. You got to grind through that, man. You got to forge that within yourself. And there's a truth to that. Um, Wrapping all these competition, potential, responsibility, loyalty. When we built these out, I really framed these and modeled these after the four Stoic virtues, which I really got from the Ryan Holiday book series, and that is courage, justice, temperance, which basically means self-control, and wisdom. And so I was looking for like four things that can kind of be these anchors. And what's really cool is that as these are maybe growing, changing, evolving, the way that I'm seeing them is like we have built out different mental models that almost layer on top of these. When you were speaking about something that you said in kind of your last share there, it made me think about the three-phase approach that we discovered when you came out here, right? Phase one is giving up the shit that is clearly bad for you. Phase two is giving up the shit that is generally good for you, but holding you back from the big time transcendence that you're looking for. Phase three is the action of giving up those things in phase two, and then the realization, oh, I'm not actually sacrificing anything because it's worth it. Right. And that reminds me of Andrew Parker. We spoke with him back probably 3 or 4 months ago on one of the team calls. And he was just dialed in everything, right? He was in his 70.3 prep. And we're like, what are you sacrificing? He's like, I don't feel like I'm sacrificing anything. And we're like, boom, you're living in phase three. It's beautiful to see. Um, okay. Let's another theme I wanted to just say that's been a recent theme amongst a lot of folks on the team that I think applies to so much of this is just this idea of playing offense. Dog, we have to be playing offense. Like I continually see, the guy that's uploading the 6 p.m. run every day. Like, dog, I'm proud of you for getting it in, and I see you hustling on it. But we cannot be thinking that this is a sustainable approach, right? Because we need to be getting this stuff done out of the way. We need to be getting it done early, and we need to be on top of this shit so that we can drop all of this stress. Right. Part of being responsible to ourselves, part of staying loyal to ourselves is also having the awareness that we don't need to be on guard freaking 24/7. Like, let's just be on guard for the first hour of the day. Let's wake up and go run and then be done with it, man. Like, that's the whole key of playing offense. It's not that we're playing offense all day, it's that we don't want to be playing defense all day. That's the idea. That's the secret. Okay, so there are three things, almost like three steps that I realized as you were doing your last share there that maybe can be our launching pad for digging in a little deeper on why endurance sets us up to be the best version of ourselves, is the closest truth to day-to-day life, etc. Number one, I wrote that it brings us closer to reality and nature. And I don't necessarily mean nature in the sense of like, oh, I'm out in the mountains, I'm at a park, that kind of thing. I more mean like the nature of reality, I suppose. A kind of funny, example that I use sometimes is like, listen, if I'm out on a run and I gotta take care of myself and squat and pull down my pants, like that's just reality, right? And there's a simplicity in that. There's almost like a carefreeness that can come once you accept that that's just the truth of what the situation is, right? And whether it's having a situation like that on a run, or whether it's being out on a bike ride and you get a flat tire, or whether it's being far from home and you're running out of fuel, but what are you going to call for a ride? You got to pedal your ass back. It's like any of these things just bring us like face to face with truth and with struggle and with suffering, and they give us an opportunity to move beyond that. So that was number one. Number two is being more open to possibilities and dropping expectations. So all those things that I just shared, I think I had highlighted this in I think the last pod that we did. But like once you get into this stuff, you realize, hey, it's a real possibility that shit isn't going to go exactly how I want to draw it up. And as a result of that, I would really benefit by dropping a lot of my expectations and learning just to roll with things. And this is getting back to the idea of nature, because our human nature, I really believe that for us to be most successful and living in harmony is to be able to flow with whatever challenges come our way. It's not about avoiding challenge, and it's not always about like grinding and gritting yourself through challenge. There'll be times we need to do that, right? Like Charlie's race is an example of that. But like when Mike McMahon was out here for training camp and I got a flat tire halfway up Left Hand Canyon and I've got no phone service, it's like, all right, well, what's the next step of what to do? And that's point three. That's adapt and overcome, which is just learning to, hey, we can shift up what we're doing. We can overcome this challenge. And now all of a sudden, like we're in this harmony with nature and with what's going on around us and with the activities we're subjecting ourselves to. So I think a core theme on top is really like truth. And then to share those three again for you to maybe riff off of them was bringing us closer to reality and nature, being more open to possibility and dropping our expectations, and then adapting and overcoming.
Yes, yes, yes to all of that. And what you say, the first part, you know, it it seems obvious to us, but
Let me add one more thing. I'm sorry to cut you,
yeah.
but I wanted
Yeah.
to make a
No worries.
comparison. Because the more that I find, sharing this stuff, I don't want to just be sharing it and telling, right? I want to be able to provide examples of almost like contrast, right? So earlier it was like the contrast of somebody who just has interest in doing a 70.3, but they don't have the environment of the team, right? That's how to not find your potential. Well, I would say that there's like not much about like lifting in a gym that brings you really close to reality. Like reality in like kind of the like almost like borderline interdimensional sense that we're speaking about it here. Right? It's like, yeah, you can suffer and you can work really hard and you can struggle and you can overcome, but there's not that sense of nature or of just like truth of experience that you get in endurance. So that was the last thing I wanted to add, and now the mic is yours.
Yeah, I would just suggest when it comes to those other motions or movement patterns or sports or physical activities, I would say that it's not that they're not tied to reality, it's that they're more limited. They're more limited in their application, whereas endurance, I believe, is broad. And it's so broad that it maps up more closely to many of the life experiences that we have. Like there are definitely moments in life where I need the 10 seconds of intensity that heavy barbell training is going to teach me, where I just need like to summon every single part of me for a very short, intense burst of whatever it is. Like I need that, but that's not my whole life. Like that's not my whole life. What endurance does is it gives us the breadth of experience that we touch across our entire lives, which is why I believe it's more fruitful of a place to sort of aim these more spiritual matters. But just to get down to like the most basic understanding of this, right? We take it for granted. we take it for granted that we believe that we can transfer lessons from the body outside of it, right? That's not a viewpoint that's shared throughout the different philosophies of sport, we'll say. So we have to appreciate that we are operating under a particular philosophical view that says, no, actually, this is real and this is useful. And the most basic way we can understand this, and I'll try not to get too prof mode into it here, but I am looking at reading notes and my basic philosophy here, so we're gonna have to dive into it at some point. And you wanted me to do this, so if anybody's angry about this philosophic turn, go talk to Coach. When we are operating from this philosophy, we are applied phenomenologists. That's our particular philosophical category, right?
Bring that down to ground level. What does that mean?
Phenomenology is simply the philosophy of experience, right?
Okay.
So I'm not interested in defining the nature of things. I'm interested in unpacking the meaning of experience. So when people think about philosophy, they think about like, oh, we're going to be defining things. What fits in what category? Like what is similar and different? Plato's sort of opening salvo for philosophy. It's like, what do we do when we call two different things by the same name? Or what happens when we have this, like, what happens when we have two names for the same thing? How do we square those circles? It's like, that's kind of like what most people think about for philosophy. It's like the objective definitions of things and then seeing what fits and what doesn't fit. Phenomenology, we don't care about that. I don't need to know what sport necessarily is. I just need to know that when I'm doing it, certain things happen. Okay. And so phenomenology is fine, but that's still the realm of ideas. So we're not interested in just reading books and writing things down and then letting the interpretation happen outside of what we're doing. As we mentioned, it's a living, breathing, dynamic philosophy. So we have a philosophy of experience, and then we apply it through the body. So we're applied phenomenologists, everyone on our team. And the sentence that I have here, the basic sentence, the truth of body experiences teaches us deeper truths about mind, spirit, and purpose. That's our functioning core belief in the tribe. The truth of our body experiences, competition and training, teaches us deeper truths about mind, spirit, and then ultimately our purpose.
The word truth has been sticking out to me lately. Like as I have just been doing this book and even just like building on all the ideas we've been sharing inside the tribe, really since we kicked off these cafes, it's like I just feel like I can freaking taste and just touch like these things that seem so true in like my freaking soul, dude. Like I feel like I'm in this process of learning these deep truths that like explain everything, but it's almost like they live on a different plane of existence. It's almost like this material plane. It's like these truths that we're feeling through endurance training and that we're discovering more and more through calls like this and through our shared athlete experiences and our team experiences and our reflections. It's like we are accessing something that is like on a higher plane of existence. And I think we're just getting closer and closer to like what that is and how we can like bring it down onto this material plane and play with it more and play with it more and understand it more and extract more out of it. I really like that sentence that you shared. You said the truth of our body experiences, and then I didn't get to write down the last part. You said what basically tells us deeper truths.
I'm gonna put it in the chat right now. If I can figure out where the chat is. Yeah, the truth of body experiences Oh gosh, the grammar is bad on this. I apologize, everybody. The truth of body experiences teach us about deeper truths, teach us deeper truths about mind, spirit, and purpose. Oh my gosh, bad grammar. These are rough notes. I apologize. It's all about having a high internal standard. It's all about having a high internal standard, folks.
Deeper truths.
Pulling me out of Plato's caves with these conversations, truth being revealed further and further through my experience. That's right. That's legitimately it, Grant. That's legitimately it.
So let's get in the weeds here and let's see if we can play around with like let's think about Charlie's experience, right? That's like just a super recent relevant one, right? But like the truth of let's reframe the language here to apply it directly to Charlie, right? Like the truth of Charlie's body experience teaches him deeper truths about mind, spirit, and purpose. So mind, spirit, and purpose. I'm almost a little bit. Those are starting to drift away in my mind. Of like the truth of body experience. Like to me, I can touch that. I know exactly what that means. I can experience that. Right. I have experienced that. But then as the sentence continues to deeper truths about mind, spirit, and purpose, that gets a little bit like I can feel it drifting away. Yep. So bring me back. Yep. Bring me back down with it.
Mind is mental fortitude, right? Mind is my ability, right, to look soberly and objectively at the task or the challenge at hand, feel the fear, but then make a plan and execute the plan and go through the plan, right? The body experience of feeling a leg cramp and then just continuing to run and then oops, all of a sudden that leg cramp went away, right? It's like, okay, right? Now I can incorporate that into my planning when adversity is going to strike. Now, is it one-to-one? No, but it's just the first example that sort of popped into my mind. So mind is mental fortitude.
I like that. That's clear.
To bring it back down, even let's go back even further, right? When I say that we are applied phenomenologists, it also means that we are operating from an embodied conception of what a human being is. A human being is not a mind separated out from the body. A human being is a mind, body, and spirit united. And effectively, they're all the same, but different. And if you don't like paradoxes, well, then you're not going to enjoy this philosophy because it's all based on paradoxes. But hey, paradoxes to me are signals of deep meaning. They're signals of extraordinary power. So we should want to lean into paradoxes. Okay, so we're embodied. I just said, what is the mind? The mind is the part of me that thinks, analyzes, reasons. The body is the part of me that moves, that feels, that experiences. Okay, so then what's the spirit? This is the part where people really have problems because we are similar to what you're saying about the material reality is we have to comport whatever the definition of a thing is to its material component. And even when we're talking about like immaterial things like love or justice or beauty, we tend to ground those in material experiences in order to better understand them. Like if I want to describe
we see justice as like the criminal gets arrested and put in jail.
Correct. Or like beauty is like that amazing sculpture or work of art or beautiful song or something like that. We have to tie it into some sort of a material reality because, hint, hint, that's maybe one of the reasons why we are actually inside of the bodies, why we have these bodily experiences, but that's maybe a bit too far ahead right now. What is the spirit then? People have a really hard time with the spirit because how do we actually connect this to some sort of a material experience within us? Is it like prayer? Is it just going into our holy houses and just chanting what everybody else is chanting and doing the rituals that everyone else does? It's maybe a part of it, but when I'm trying to think about like what we are, the spirit is willpower. The spirit is the part of me that when the body says, I don't want to go, and the mind says, you certainly shouldn't go, the spirit that says, you absolutely have to go and you will go. That's courage. That's bravery. That's irrationality. That's love, right? Like the spirit is the part of us that wills us to do the things that the other parts of us do not want to do. And why do we want to do it? Because it's relating to something that's deep inside of us, that's maybe more important than the material reality that we face ourselves, that we're facing. Right. So on the race, it's like my body, like my entire body is cramping. I'm dehydrated. I'm in tremendous amounts of pain. The mind will start to come in and say, you've gone farther than you've already gone. Nobody else, would even consider going to the start line of this thing. And look how far you've already come. You can just walk. You can walk this out, right? But the spirit says, no, I'm going to show up and I want to run this final part of this 70.3 or this Ironman or whatever the heck it is that we're doing. And it says, I don't care if the body hurts. I don't care if the mind has all of these legitimate reasons why we can quit or we can downgrade our effort. The spirit says, no, I demand perfection. I demand something greater than those things that are limiting me right now. Right. And when we start to sync all those up together, the truth of body experiences teach us a deeper truths about mind and spirit. Well, then something like our purpose, the meaning of our lives, becomes highlighted for us. It becomes obvious. It becomes crystal clear that the material world, the settling, the mediocrity that everybody else tells us, hey, it's okay to not push yourself. Why do you got to go do an Ironman? Why not just go to the gym 3 times a week and get your 60 minutes of cardio on the elliptical for your heart? Because that's all we're supposed to be doing in the gym anyways, is like preserving our bodies as adults. No, the spirit demands more. The spirit demands the challenge, the adventure, the exhilaration. The spirit wants to be brought into contact with failure so it can rise above it time and time again. And every time we get to do this and feel it truthfully in the body, what we're capable of, just again, it becomes more obvious where we should be aiming ourselves, what that truer purpose is inside of us, because we've realized something. We realize something powerful through the truth of what we just made our bodies do. And again, we're not just bodies or minds or spirits isolated off, but all in conjunction with each other. So if that didn't make sense, force me to do a better job.
No, that was amazing, dude. That was fabulous. That was very, very clear and concise. My favorite part of that probably was that connecting spirit to willpower, but then you also labeled that as courage, bravery, and then you circled back and labeled that as the challenge and the adventure. Right. So maybe we could go through here and maybe we could add into mind, right? We identified that as mental fortitude. What are maybe the more actionable ways that is revealed, right? Would we label like language in that category?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that we can do with the spirit and in the body is to gain a bit of a hold over the mind, right? One of the best ways to think about our brains is that they are shortcut mechanisms. It's like a shortcut machine, right? Which is great. We need shortcuts. Oh my gosh, do we need shortcuts in the world? Like there's too much out there for us, right? There's too much information for us to process. So our brains filter. Another way to think about this is our brains are filtering mechanisms, right? They take what's not necessary for us to move forward in the world and really only presents us what we truly need to see. And just think about what your eyes see, everybody. Like we see like less than 1% of light on the electromagnetic spectrum. We're not even close to seeing everything out there in the world, but we don't need to. We don't need to see everything. We just need to filter out what's useful for us, which is great. But if the mind is a shortcut machine, well, when it's presented with shortcuts on effort, right, it's going to take it. When it's provided shortcuts on work, or I can do 50%, but get 100% of the credit, hey, I'm going to do that, right? This is the idea of we like to trick ourselves into thinking what the hard thing really is, but it ends up just being the easy thing for us. And we always avoid like the really hard thing. It's because the mind is this ultimate trickster, because it's meant to filter out our experiences. So we can use the body and the spirit to sort of rewire the way the brain creates shortcuts. And a lot of the shortcuts, just thinking about the composition of our brain, we have 3 different brains, friends. We've got the reptilian brain, we have the sort of the mammalian brain, and then we've got like the prefrontal cortex, which is like the rational part of the brain. The oldest part of our brain's the reptilian part. That's just instinct, that's just actions, right? And what does that part of our brain want? That part of our brain wants comfort. That part of our brain wants security. That's the part of our brain that wants to eat all the fat and sugar possible because we don't know when our next meal is, because that's how we used to survive, right? So our brains are effectively setting us up to take the shortcuts that lead to more comfort. Now, when we start to train, and endurance is great at this, we can actually start to use the body and the spirit to reverse those shortcuts. And something like language, like self-talk, self-dialogue, is an excellent way to understand that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because if we just change a little bit of our internal language and then we map that to the truth of what we do in training and to this sort of spiritual willpower, then all of a sudden our minds are going to start defaulting to these shortcuts that move us up and away from comfort instead of what it's sort of programmed to do, which is to slide us back, which is to slide us back. So it's just understanding. And I love how you talked about this idea of nature, right? And not just like the nature that's around us, but the nature of like who we are and the nature of this existence that we all find ourselves in. The more we understand how we're operating on a default way, well, shoot, we can start to hack that and start to, make body, mind, and spirit all align towards something like a greater purpose or a greater potential within ourselves, as opposed to having the default being what we see around us: comfort, mediocrity, settling. So when we're able to understand these constituent parts and what they do, we can start to unlock how we can use them together in ways to like overcome maybe like the natural tendencies, but also kind of like the character deficiencies and weaknesses that are inside of each one of us, that we can then start to work on.
Beautiful, beautiful. So language is one for the mind and mental fortitude. I also wrote down resilience and determination. It to me is kind of skewing in the direction of like not falling susceptible or victim to those reptilian impulses, I'd say.
Yeah, it's something like that. Now, one of the things that I'm really focusing on, it's like not just how do we flip around these sort of mental shortcuts, but actually how do we align all this to this greater understanding of like a spiritual existence. So when I do this is like the top of the pyramid. It's like self-actualization. So when all of our needs are met, so when I have enough food, I've got shelter, I've got family, I've got community. When all those needs are kind of met, what's left? The things that are just for me, the things that allow me to grow individually. So that's what we're trying to do with the training. We're trying to aim the training at the very top of this pyramid, right? It's not just for health. It's not just for community. It's about using those things as a launching pad and a foundation towards something greater. And I've been reading a lot of scripture, like Old Testament scripture. I've been reading my philosophy here, and I've been mapping that with the experiences we have in the tribe and my previous sort of historical understanding of sport, and just, I would say, the evolution of culture. And there's something that sticks out really profoundly in the Old Testament about the idea of holiness, right? And effectively, what holiness means is to be set apart. Holiness means to be set apart, to be different than the normal, right? To not do the same things that other people are doing. And here's like the really fun part of this. It's all aligned back with truth, right? Truth is the foundation of all this stuff. So if we are attempting to use the training to guide us towards more of a spiritual understanding of our existence, we have to do things to continually set ourselves apart, right? And one of the ways we approach that, and there's another thing that comes from the scriptures, with the open heart. The heart in ancient traditions, both Eastern and Western traditions, is the center of wisdom. Wisdom's not up here. Wisdom's not in the mind. The mind is where rationality lives, right? But like the instinct, the gut, the truth, when you're no longer able to like accept the rationalizations and excuses in your mind and you think, no, like something's got to change, that comes from in here. It comes from your center. In the Old Testament, they call it wise-heartedness, which I just love. I mean, it's just perfect, right? So what we want to do, and this speaks to the idea of openness, and I do this a lot. So for people who are watching, this is like the nice open hand motion that comes directly out of my heart, right? When we open up our hearts, what we are doing is we are accepting truth, right? The good or the bad, right? And what sets us apart from other people is our courage and bravery to look at the truth. That's ultimately what makes us holy, because most of what people do is ignoring the truth or massaging the truth, manicuring the truth in order to fit, right? To fit in with whatever's going on inside their brains. But then that creates the resentment or the self-deceit or like the, hey, let's just get right there, like the self-loathing that happens when you're projecting out something that's not the truth of who you are on the inside, right? So if we are to aim this stuff towards the spiritual realm, it's really that openness to truth that allows us to be engaged in a spiritual endeavor. And what was that sentence that I put in the chat, right? The truth of the body experiences. The truth of the body experiences. The greatest truth we actually feel in this life is what occurs in the body. That's the pain. That's the physical joy. Like that's all of these things we viscerally experience in the body. These are the greatest touch points of truth that we can actually experience. Okay. So this is sort of the building blocks of my argument that sports, well, I mean, they are spiritual. When we utilize them for their best, because that's my argument, it's not how can they be used in 1,000 different ways, because they can be used in 1,000 different ways. I'm interested in the best. I'm interested in the maximal value of this activity that allows us to supercharge that top of the pyramid for personal development and growth. This is the spiritual understanding of sport, right? That we're open to the truth that the body reveals to us through honest effort and experience. And whatever that result is, we have to be willing to accept. That's the win or the loss. But it's all about that open heart. So when I lose, I'm learning. When I win, I'm humble, right? And this is just a note that I have. So I hope it's going to make a little bit of sense with all this, but the spirit aims for perfection, right? That's why it's able to defy the mind and sort of like override the body. It wants perfection. It demands perfection. Perfection is not really of this world for us. It's another thing we all experience. And this idea of holiness is kind of being faultless in the heart, right? So we approach the truth with a full heart that's open. It's okay to miss the mark. We don't have to be perfect in our actions in order to be holy. This is sort of a overriding thing in a lot of religions, where it's like, do I have to follow all the rules? And if I don't, will I be blocked out of like the riches and the bounties of the divine life? No. It's about intention. It's about our heart, right? We're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes in the body. It's fine. It's going to happen. What we need to do when we do miss the mark is to be honest about it and speak the truth. That's why the competition is so valuable. It's not enough just for me to fail and then to like keep it inside of myself. I've got to be open about where I'm failing, where I didn't make the mark, right? And so as long as we're honest, whether we hit the mark or we don't hit the mark, Like that's really all that there is. So I think I'm kind of all over the place now. So you probably should stop me.
No. This is great. This is great. This is exactly why I love having you a part of everything. This is exactly what I love to learn, and this is exactly how I like to have athletes in the tribe think differently on what we're doing. This is great. Um, Couple of things that I wrote down there. One is to deny the truth, and one is to accept the truth. Right. So to deny the truth is to make excuses and to be in denial. Right. That's the examples of the guys not in tribal that we watched fail at a 70.3 back in December, who were blaming the race officials, who didn't take the competition seriously, who didn't prepare for it, who failed miserably, and then pointed the finger at everybody else. Right. That's the complete denial of truth. And then the acceptance of truth, to me, it's both open mind and open heart. And that almost connects back to what I was saying previously, which is being open to possibility. That was the second of those three things I had written down. Number one was bringing us closer to reality. Number two was being open to possibilities. And number three was adapting and overcoming. Layered in with number two was being open to possibilities and dropping expectations. So let's think about those guys who failed at it was Florida 70.3 in December, the non-tribal guys, right? Well, why were they potentially set up to deny truth is because they had extreme expectations. They had expectations that they could roll in and dominate that race without preparing for it appropriately. And when they didn't, then all of a sudden they're making excuses left and right, right? And that's just continued denial, right? Rather than, you think about us coming up short at Zion, right? Like we were open to possibility and we had a goal to get all 10 athletes across the finish line, but I wouldn't say that was, necessarily an expectation, right? And then layered within that was, certainly through the experience of that open mind and open heart. So no, that was fabulous, dude. That was a beautiful prof mode. I want to get back to those three things that you had shared. Let me actually connect that point to the truth of this sentence here. So the truth of the body experience teaches us deeper truths about mind, spirit, and purpose. So if we're denying the truth of the mind body experience, we are blocking ourselves from getting to the second half of that sentence, right? So if we are denying the truths of the body experience of those guys who failed at Florida 70.3 was that, hey, you didn't prepare well enough. You didn't take this seriously enough. You had expectations that were unreasonable, right? But you were in denial of that truth. So you were denied the deeper truths of the mind, spirit, and purpose, which would have led to potential transcendence even within that failure, right? And that's the value of the Zion experience, is that we accepted the truths of the body experience, and that is why we were able to learn deeper truths about the mind, spirit, and purpose, right? So that, for one, just sticks out. But then getting back to mind, spirit, and purpose, so we said mind was mental fortitude, and then how does that really show up? Language, resilience, and determination were the other two that I had written down in there. Spirit, that's willpower, and that's like courage, bravery, the seeking of the challenge, the desire for adventure, right? And for purpose, I wrote down aim. And it seems to me, I know that's a big word for you, right? I'm glad to see a smile come on your face there. That's really your word in my mind.
Really Aristotle's. It's really Aristotle's word.
Well, you're Aristotle to me.
Hi-oh.
If we orient the mind appropriately, right, with the acceptance of truth, and then if we cultivate the spirit, right, and the spirit needs to be cultivated, right? Like, we've all got courage and bravery within us, but we got to be seeking out the challenge and we got to be chasing the adventure. Otherwise, that courage and that bravery, if you're not doing bicep curls, those biceps are going to atrophy. If you're not flexing the courage muscle and the bravery muscle, those muscles are going to atrophy, right? So we need the challenge, we need the adventure. But the pairing of all of that, it allows us to continually refine our aim, right? And I think that there's also probably maybe a separate conversation, but like, what happens, when maybe the mind is trying to tell you that you're not aiming for the right thing anymore, but that's really just because it's getting hard. And because you're having to sacrifice things that you don't want to sacrifice, which is phase two, right?
Mm.
But yeah, aim. Do you have any words that stick out around aim? You know, along those themes of the way that language, resilience, and determination were for mental fortitude, and the way that courage, bravery, the challenge, the adventure, you know, spoke to willpower. You know, when we think about aim and purpose, what are kind of the day-to-day implementations of that to you?
It's a great question. The first thing that comes to my mind is the nature of the sacrifices that we make. Okay. That's the
Um,
thing. That's the thing that binds like athletics and religion together, is this notion of sacrifice. You know, like, what is athletics? What is sport other than a sacrifice of the body in order to achieve something, right?
Oh,
And
I gotta go here, dude. I gotta share
oh
what's
yeah,
on my mind, not leave.
please,
I gotta blurb. So that to
dude,
me
do it.
connects back to, okay, right. If we've got a father of three, right, and if every day he's saying I gotta go ride my bike for 3 hours, right, from fucking 8 to 11 a.m., right, that's not a good aim, right? Because the sacrifices are taking care of the kids, making the wife carry the whole load, right? Hey, maybe once a week, maybe every other week, maybe once a month, whatever your situation is, right? But probably not every day. That's probably not a good sacrifice day to day. So that would be that your aim is off. But let's then think back to what I was saying earlier in the pod on kind of the alive time versus dead time, and the guy who's hitting the snooze, and the guy who's scrolling on the phone in the evening when he could be getting himself set up for the next day. Those are the sacrifices that are required to do endurance, right? And to make any of this stuff happen. So to me, that would be an indication that, like, hey, your aim, the things that you're sacrificing, you're not making other people sacrifice so much, right? Maybe that's a layer in it. And this is back to the personal leadership and the personal responsibility. You're the one bearing the sacrifice, right? You know, asking your wife for support, right? And when I ask Chelsea to handle Jack so I can go on a certain ride once a week or once every other week, right? That's different than just saying fuck off and making the other people around you bear the load that you're not willing to lift. No, 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 not at all, right? The sacrifice is your personal sacrifice.
1000%. And the reason why I went to the word sacrifice, not that I'm staring at some of the notes that I've made that are all about sacrifice. That's not it at all. No, it is. But also because, right, aim is what alerts us to the correct or incorrect sacrifices that we're making. And it's kind of like when it's just a reverse engineer. When I say aim, it really is that purpose. It's like, what's the greatest thing? What's the greatest value that I can live by? What's the greatest thing that I can do in my life? Right. And most people have the wrong aim. Most people have the wrong aim because, again, it's this like settling. It's this settling for the material plane. Right. So, what's my aim? Get a good job, secure the good job, get a good house, secure the good house, like get the bag and coast. Get the bag and coast. That's kind of like what society tells us to do, right? Why is everybody so unhappy when they get all these things? It's right because that's not the aim that's inside of them. When we're trying to think about aim, that's the top of the pyramid. Pardon me. Like, that's your self-actualization. That's the let's remove everything. Let's remove the restrictions. Let's remove the sort of the temporal like boundaries on you. And if you could just dream, about what I think I could be doing, what's the greatest version of myself, that's your aim. And again, that's not like, that doesn't come from up here. That doesn't come from, oh, well, I was born here. I came from a family with this amount of money. These are the schools that I have. This is what, one of my authority figures told me was really important in life. So I'm putting all those together in some sort of spreadsheet analysis. And, oh, that's kind of like my greatest utilitarian purpose in life is to do this based on, no, I'm not interested in that. I want your heart. I want your spirit. If none of the things in the world could limit you, what would you do? What's the biggest impact you could make? That's the aim. That's where you should be driving your life towards, because that's your individuality. That's why Aristotle tells us to aim there, because what I'm going to aim at is different from what you're going to aim at, and is different from Laith or Brandon or Logan or Tara or Grant or Trevor or Dylan. Those are all the people on the call. Love you guys. And by all of us individually maximizing that potential that's within us, which we're sort of being aimed at with, what am I interested in? What am I passionate about? What's my environment? Like all these things. When we fully develop ourselves to the greatest of our potential, we end up serving everybody else in the world, because we all have unique talents and skills that no other individual can produce. So it's actually of spiritual importance, individually and sort of like collectively, that we all go after the best versions of ourselves, because that's what actually materializes heaven on earth. Inside of ourselves, a heaven inside of ourselves, where every time we make a sacrifice and we give something up, we realize and recognize that it's worth it, because it moves us to that next level, right? Hell is something like, I keep giving things away and nobody recognizes it, nobody respects it, and I'm not getting anything back. So now I'm going to tear the world. I'm going to destroy the world. I'm going to destroy the world. And from my personal vantage, I'm trying to bridge disparate philosophies together. I'm looking to bridge religion, actual philosophy from the West, and philosophy from the East together. And it's like, well, how the heck do you do that? How the heck do you bring together all these disparate streams of analysis? And to me, it's obvious. It's the individual. It's the individual person. That's who we're looking, when I talk about setting us apart, right? It's through this idea of the individual making the correct sacrifices in service of their own individualized aim. And one of the things that comes from the Old Testament, which I love, is this idea of being faultless. Judaism, there's a ton of rules. Like, there's so many rules. It's crazy how many rules there are. Is the person who just follows them but doesn't believe in them, are they better than the person who believes but maybe doesn't hit all of the right rules? It's the latter. It's not the former. It's that heart that matters the most. So we're instructed to become faultless in our sacrifices. And it's not that, oh, I don't make the wrong sacrifice materially. It's that each time I make a sacrifice, it comes from the purity of my heart. It comes from the purity of my heart, right? And if I come from a Western philosophy background, an Eastern philosophy background, any of the different major religions in the world, they all center in on this idea that we can approach holiness, or we can approach perfection through action. There are things that we can do in the world that will get rid of some of those imperfections. You know, when I talked about the mind taking those mental shortcuts, the reptilian brain, something like that. I expunge the imperfections of myself through action, which is related to the open heart and the sacrifices that derive from that purity. Okay. That's why training in the team is a spiritual endeavor, friends. That's why we're up above what everybody else can accomplish in terms of training and extracting out these deep lessons. It's because they don't understand how it's related, not just to like our individual journeys, but like this whole entire human journey. You know, you're talking about, I'm touching these truths. I feel these truths. It's because it's these existential truths. We're actually learning more about the nature of our reality than other people. That's why it's so powerful. And what sets us apart from other philosophers, and I do believe everybody on the team is a philosopher. You're all just in it with me at this point. And your contributions are the truth of actions that you do with your training and in competition, right? So you guys are all, honestly, You guys are my primary source material in all this, and I love you all so much.
Well,
for
dude,
it.
I got to add something on that. So,
Amazing.
actually, let me. Do you want anything you want to finish with there?
No, I lost my train of thought. Or sorry, you derailed my train of thought. I'll put
I
it that. I
derailed your
think
train of thought. I'm sorry. I wanted
that's
to
a,
give Matt
that
Bank. I wanted to give
that's
Matt
okay.
Bank a shout out because Matt Bank. I was
That's
talking to
okay.
him last week about. Um, I was watching some videos on how Ryan Holiday writes his books. Ryan Holiday just came out with a new book, Right Thing Right Now, and he's got this series on YouTube that he's been doing, which is basically a behind the scenes on him constructing it. And he's got this really interesting note card system that he learned from Robert Greene, and he's got a lot of other material on how he pulls that all together. But basically, Ryan Holiday like reads all these books and he highlights in them and underlines in them, and then he sets them aside for about a month and then goes back to them and transfers the stories and the lessons to these note cards that he then puts into basically this big box where all of his lessons and all of his stories that he references in his writing, that's where everything comes from. And I was talking to Matt Bank about this, and Matt Bank, I was deceiving myself a little bit because I was like, well, what if I get these other things from this book or this book? And he's like, dude, what about the stories from Ryan Dreyer's life? I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with this whole thing. But I've been deceiving myself and all of a sudden telling myself that I got to read some fucking Teddy Roosevelt book to get a lesson that we are experiencing in truth and reality day to day. So apologies for derailing you there, but shout out to Matt Bank and just really my point in sharing that was just highlighting that like we are learning this and digging deeper into this and getting closer to all of these truths with every single team experience, every single athlete experience, every single share in the team chat. Like it's giving us one more little connection point, one more little node, right? Might be something as simple as you know, my Sunday run a couple weeks ago going like shit and not throwing up a zero, right? Something as simple as that. And it could be something as grand as Zion, and it could be somewhere in between with, you know, the Happy Valley race and Chattanooga, right? But that's really what we have going on here.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And yeah, don't worry about the derailing of the thought thing. And there's just too many of them sometimes in the brain. So they're always going to get derailed in some sense, which is why I'm doing the writing and the note taking and eventually trying to formulate all this into a coherent picture, which will come out as a book at some point in the future. I don't know when. There's no rushing on this process. It's just more of like the way I would think about this for me, it's more of a daily practice that
Yeah, so
keeps me
let's get
sharp.
some you know, this is for the what I have dubbed Tribal Writers Guild, the guys who have created Substacks or who are publishing online. Let's get into your process here a little bit to wrap up. What does daily
Yeah.
practice mean for you? What are you doing? What are you holding yourself accountable to? And how can we maybe apply some training process you know, to what we have going on with the writing stuff?
So for me, it's about reading and note taking. That to me is a signal that I'm engaged in the mental construction of something. I mean, like I'm a prof or was a
So give us
prof.
an example of that. You're reading this book right now that's what's the title of this book again?
This is Introduction to the Philosophy of Sport. I used to teach an introductory philosophy and history of sport course. So what this is doing, this is like the first step in effectively bridging the experiential evidence that you just talked about that we're doing on the tribe with the theoretical stuff that's already been written by other philosophers, right?
Right.
So personally, as an academic, my strength is synthesis. I have an extraordinary talent to look at disparate streams of information and see how they all connect into a coherent whole and an understanding.
Mm.
That's my particular academic skill, I guess you could say, which is why I was never really a historian, but more of a philosopher of history.
Because you were
Like I wasn't
connecting different things that happened in history to just like pull out ideas and commonalities and
yeah,
bring them all together.
I wasn't somebody who scoured archives to find the thing that nobody else had found before and just to present them as like, here's an objective record, which is definitely one of the things that historians do and are responsible for. But that wasn't what I did. That's not my dissertation. That wasn't my research. My research was synthesizing different ideas together. in a way that nobody had ever done them before. So what I'm now doing is I had kind of a belief about what sport was supposed to be used for, to the high, like for its best purpose. This is one of the reasons I just gravitated towards you and the team, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is it in action. This is it being applied in the world. So I need to be a part of this. And going through Zion and seeing everything that's gone on with the team and everybody's experiences, I was just like, yep, it's real. It's true. It was confirmed to me. So now what I'm doing is I'm just going back and I'm syncing up the literature with what I know is true within myself. And that just starts with a basic, what are we talking about? What's the base level of philosophy in sport? And I've gotten an incredible amount of synthesis just by going back through these introductory ideas and introductory arguments. And for anybody out there who's interested in a writing process or a larger exploration, the starting point, it's important in that it opens you up. So I didn't know exactly what the next thing I needed to do was, but I knew that this would be a really great launch pad. And what it's done is it's like, oh, I need to read that book. I need to get into that author's argument. And then I'm just merging that with other things. So I know the next 3 books I need to read already once I'm finished this guy. So I'm just plowing through, making notes. I'm not super worried about like synthesizing everything right now. Every once in a while, I've got a master document with all my big ideas, which is what I was referencing today. But then I have a separate document, which is all the specific notes with the specific pages and the specific names and all the quotations. And so really it's like me just getting back into prof mode, into research mode, which I haven't been doing at all. And for me, I'm at my most effective when I'm reading and when I'm writing and when I'm using my mind to create something new. And what's been really amazing is how I just think it's making me a better coach, both like on the team, but also outside the team with my one-on-one people that I work with outside of the team context. So it's really just about making academic reading and writing habitual in my new life as it was in my old life. And then the product will come from that, because that's where the aim is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just read, write, and make notes for no reason. It's to create something, whether that's like an article. If you're a student, obviously that's whatever your prof wants you to do. So that's your essays. But, I was forced to, when I was a prof, it's like, you got to publish, you got to be reading, you got to be writing. And I hated that part because it was in service of things that were, let's be honest, like useless. And this is the most useful thing in the world right now for me. So I've got the inspiration, I've got the experience, I've got the evidence, I have the motivation, I have the environment. And so I'm just creating the habit. I'm doing the action now. And the action is in the morning, sometimes it's 10 minutes, and it's literally, I'll just go section to section. So it's something like that little part at that little section at the bottom might just be a page and a half, or it might be 2 pages. And I'll just get through maybe 1 section, maybe 2 sections of a chapter, and just continuing to work my way. And I think I'm over halfway done the book now. And I'm starting to get into parts of the book that are not relevant at all to me, so I can zip through them a little bit more quickly. And that's a little bit into my process, I guess. If there's anything else I can add, let me know. Or you want me to
No,
add,
that's
let me know.
great. I love it. I think that the biggest thing that I've been learning through my own process is just like the habit of doing it every day. The habit of contributing to it in some way every single day is more important than what the structure needs to be. Having a launching pad of ideas has been very important, but also knowing that things will emerge is certainly true and important as well. But no, I think that's a beautiful place to stop. I am literally about to pee my pants. So let's wrap it here. This is one of my favorite cafes ever, if not number one. So thanks so much for all the wisdom, Goldstein. And thanks so much for the group here, Laith, Logan, Brandon, Grant, Tara, Trevor, and Spina for joining and being a part of this. We will see you in the chat. Adios.